Welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Keith and I'm sharing my journey in 3D printing. I recently got into it earlier this year and I've started a business, so just sharing my journey on all the mistakes I make, how to fix those mistakes so you don't make them as well. The last couple weeks have been interesting. A lot went wrong, but I think some of that was my fault and I did fix some of those things. So I want to go over some of the issues that I had and what I did to fix it in case you guys are also new. You can avoid these problems. And I do have to fix a clog in one of my other printers that we'll go take a look at as well. So I'm trying out a different camera in here. This is the one that's usually in my studio. If you see me behind a black wall, that is in my other room that I use as a studio with a desk and all the fancy equipment and stuff like that. I like this because it's full frame and you can see a lot more in the picture versus what I normally use in here is the Sony ZV-E10. And this is a great camera. This is the one I got when I decided to upgrade from my iPhone to a real camera. And this thing's been great. The only thing about this is it is a crop sensor camera. So basically it crops in almost 1.5. So the shots are a lot tighter, especially since I'm not that far away from the camera. It basically couldn't see all this stuff around me. So I wanted to be able to show off the 3D print stuff in the background. So I'm going to try out this camera to see how it works. But if you are just kind of getting into YouTube and want to upgrade from your phone, I do highly recommend the Sony ZV-E10. It is way more budget friendly, not only for the camera itself, but the lenses over the full frame camera. You just might have to set it a little bit further away to get your full background. So for the business side of things, Etsy was pretty busy the last couple weeks. I did run a sale that was basically 25% off everything and got quite a few orders. Somebody did reach out to me on a bulk order, which we agreed to a bulk price. He wanted 30 of these ammo containers that I sell, and they're just for 22 long rifle, holds about 55 rounds. And he wanted these because he has a shooting range. They teach kids how to shoot, so he thought it'd be a good idea to start with these. And they're gonna do another order later on this fall, depending on how many people sign up. So that was pretty cool. I'm like 30 of those. I'm gonna print off. He just wanted various colors. And I print these in PETG just because I want them to be a little more heat resistant than PLA, since they are probably gonna be outside, and in case somebody leaves them in their car, they're not gonna melt as quickly. So normally when I was printing these off, I had no issues printing in PETG. Obviously I dry them first and then print them out, and they came out great. Well, the last week after I got that order and started printing these off, the bottoms in just black, I was running the Bamboo Lab high flow or whatever it is filament, but they're out of stock on those. So then I was using my Polymaker stuff for the colors on all the caps. And I don't know what it was, but I could not get them to print at all. Like, they were coming out so bad. A lot of under extrusion and then a lot of stringing. A lot of them didn't even stick to the bed. And I've never had that issue when I did the initial run on these. Everything came out great. I did have that adhesion issue where they were sticking too well to the plates on the textured PEI plates, but then after putting glue on there, that seemed to solve that issue. But for whatever reason, that week I was trying to print out 30. I probably threw away 15 of them that just failed. They were super stringy and just a lot of under extrusion and just a lot of issues. And I don't know if it's because it was gotten really humid here and just hot. And so I've been really drying those more than just the 6 hours. And then once I have done a print or two, I'll put them back in the dryer. That seems to help. But yeah, it took a long time to actually get those to print out well. And they still haven't quite come out in the quality that the initial batch came out in. And unfortunately, Bamboo Lab is still out of stock on their stuff, which I haven't had any issues with theirs. And I tried a couple different other companies. I tried Elegoo's and eSun's, I think, or something like that. And we're still having some issues with printing these out as well. So these just came out of the P1S. And I'm still having a little bit of issues with the layer lines. So this is the original batch and everything came out pretty good. A little bit of stringing on there that I need to take care of, but these came out pretty good. Whereas these are the ones that just came off the P1S, and you can see there's some layer line issues like right there, and then some more issues right there on the initial layer. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden I've been having issues with PETG. Yeah, it seemed to be pretty consistent with the layer line issues on all of these. Which is weird because I dried this filament for quite a while before I put it in, and I have it in the AMS2. And I don't have the dryer option on there because I haven't updated the firmware to get the drying option on the P1S. But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty consistent on all four of these. So I might try, I've been having better luck on the A1s for some reason with PETG. And I did have the door open in case, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, don't print with those with the doors closed. I had the door open and it was still came out with those issues. So still trying to figure out what's going on with the PETG. But luckily those aren't as bad as the ones were the last couple weeks. Those were just completely unusable and just way worse. But it must be because the humidity and with more printers in here, it does get pretty hot in here. So that might be something I need to adjust, is the temperature in here might be an issue as well. So let's quickly talk about the Anycubic Cobra S1 back here that is currently running. I've been doing a lot of buildup for kind of Halloween. I'm going to do a lot of cool stuff for the fall, and a lot of it's multicolor, takes a while. So I've been using a lot of these multicolor printers that I have to print out a bunch of stuff. And it's worked, and I like to have it because, you know, a lot of these are 5 to 7 colors, mostly 5 or 6 different colors. And while it works, it takes a long time. The slicer program will say 24 hours or whatever, but then once it finishes, it was more on the 48-hour timeline. So I don't know where the disconnect there is between the slicer and the actual print time, but that is something I noticed. Not all the time, but most of the time it's been wrong on the print time, but it is a lot of color changes and stuff like that. Another issue I've been noticing with it occasionally is not only on the slicer program, but the screen itself on the printer isn't showing what's actually going on. The printer will be printing, but the actual screen on the printer shows like nothing's going on, and then the slicer program shows it's stuck. So the only way to fix that is to wait for the printer to be done, turn it off, close the program down, restart it, and kind of syncs. But then somewhere along the line, it like disconnects. And I don't think it's the internet, because I've had no issue with any of the other printers connecting to the slicer or the screen itself. And that's happened quite a bit on the Anycubic. Is the screen will say one thing, but the printer's doing something completely different. And the only way to fix that is to reboot it. And it seems like I have to reboot it almost every time I use it now. But the main issue I was having is the filament error, filament getting stuck. Think I figured most of that out. You just really have to be careful when you're putting in the filament into the Ace Pros. You have to make sure that it's got a nice clean cut and it's straight. If there's any curve in the end of the filament, it's going to actually miss it and come out the other side here. That's happened a lot, and then you got to take off that cover. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. I'm like in this print, it's a 33-hour print right now with 5 different colors. The first few layers, when it was switching between number 1 and number 4, it kept coming up with this filament tangle error, but there was no tangle. I took the filament out, took this cover off, looked in there, make sure that there was nothing bunched up in there, and it wasn't. Put the filament back in, hit resume, it went. And then after it did the orange, it was going back to number 4. It came up with that error again. And basically what I did is just have to hit resume and just carefully feed it through. So I don't know if maybe the motors aren't strong enough, because there was no tangle and it just needed some assistance getting that filament. So that's another thing that kind of sucks, especially on these long prints, is when it comes up with that error, it's just going to take even longer, and you got to kind of be around to fix that. But that's something that's been pretty consistent. There are some prints where that doesn't happen. Even if I'm running all 8 colors, I've had successful prints where that didn't happen, but more times than not, I do get that error still popping up, even if there is no filament tangle. And so with the stuff I'm trying to print out, I'm trying to fill the build plates with these little guys here, and they've worked great on the Bamboo Lab printers, but when I try to fill the build plate too much, even though it's all within the parameters that it needs to, there's some adhesion issues on the end, and then they don't always stick, and then they end up coming dislodged mid-print. And there is a skip option where you can skip an object on this printer just like most other ones, but for some reason for me, it didn't work. I skipped the one that I needed to on the slicer program, checked the printer, it said it was going to skip that one, but it didn't. And so I made sure that it was selected on the screen that it was supposed to skip that one object, but it just kept not skipping it and trying to print there, and I ended up having to cancel the whole print. So that happened twice. There were 2 times I had to skip an object on there, and it didn't do it even though it said it was on the print screen. Luckily it happened early and not later on in the prints, because these have been going pretty long. But at least I'm getting this thing to print, because initially I couldn't get anything to print with that filament error. There were times it was, like I said, getting tangled up. So I've just learned to be really careful and slowly insert them into the Ace Pro. and then kind of do one at a time, and it seems to resolve the issue most of the time. Now it's just for some reason throwing that error up. I don't know if there's a sensor somewhere where it thinks it's getting a filament tangle, or maybe again just the motor isn't strong enough in some of these ports, because you can see this is basically a Bambu Lab spool and it's moving freely, but for some reason it kept saying there was a tangle when there wasn't. So maybe just a weak motor or something needs to be tightened. Yeah, the Bambu Lab A1s have been printing out stuff like this great. They do take a long time and produce a lot of waste, but that's why I'm trying to fill up the bed plates and really just sell these for the fall and Halloween holiday. So moving on to the Cheedy Plus 4, had a couple clogs on that one, but so far since then it's been working. I actually just did some PETG on there to try it out and it worked great. The first one, it was probably my fault. Actually, both of them were my fault probably. After doing the first few prints on PLA, after testing it out and just making sure it worked, I thought, hey, I have this spool of PLA carbon fiber filled stuff. I'm gonna just use it to make this toolbox. And I was doing the inserts for it, and the first one printed out great, no issues. So then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do the other insert and hit print, and then walked away because I figured, hey, it worked the first time, it'll work this time. Nope, came back, I don't know, a few hours later and walked into nothing on the print bed, but a huge blob that was just caked on there. And it was pretty bad. So that was my first blob on any printer, and it was a pretty bad one. So I don't know if there was just not an initial adhesion on the first layer, or if there was a clog at the end of the last one that I didn't notice. But since nothing actually printed on the bed itself, my guess is it kind of clogged pretty quickly into the print and just went to town and caused that big blob. So reached out to Cheedy and they sent me a new nozzle and then the cooling fan on the bottom, because that plastic part did break on that. So took a little while because it came from China, but got that installed. Stayed away from the PLA carbon fiber, actually threw that roll away, and was doing great with regular PLA. So then I just finished printing out that toolbox on the Cheedy Plus 4 with just regular PLA, and everything was going fine until I came back and noticed that it was error printing again, and that obviously indicates that there was another clog. So my guess is with that, I know it tells you to, if you're printing in PLA PETG, you want everything open, but I've been printing with the Anycubic and the P1S with everything closed. I figured I wouldn't have any issues on this, but it did. So more than likely, the Cheedy Plus 4, you definitely want to at least remove the top lid when you're printing in PLA or PETG, because that was the second clog pretty close together that I had. And that's really the only thing I can think of, is that I had everything closed up and it just didn't like that. So moving forward, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be taking off the top lid, since mostly that's what I printed anyway, and then just kind of set that down there. And then when I'm not using it, just put it back on there. And hopefully that will fix the clogging issues on the Cheedy. Again, those are probably my fault, not the printers. But I do have some engineering filament that I want to try on this one, because this one should be able to handle it. Hopefully. It'll probably be my fault if anything goes wrong. So one last thing I forgot to mention on the Kobra S1 is on some of these that I'm doing a lot of multicolor, especially with the white. There is a lot of color bleed on the white, and I just went ahead and let it auto-calculate what it thought it would do. And most of the time it over-calculates for the purge, especially when you're going between white and other colors. Especially on the Bambu Lab, it kind of overcompensates for that. But figured it'd be the same way on the Kobra. But as you can see here, it's gonna be kind of hard to see on the camera, but there's a lot more red color bleed than the camera's picking up. So that whole face and the scarf is supposed to be white, but it is definitely not white. And the same thing on this one, the camera is not going to pick it up entirely, but you can see that stripe of red there. And it's more red on his face too. So in person, the color bleed's a lot more visible than on the camera. But yeah, that's something I've noticed more on that printer versus the Bambu Labs. Everything, all the other ones from there have had no color bleed, but for some reason that one has had some pretty bad color bleed. These are still usable, but something that I might have to tweak in the settings to see if that'll fix anything. All right, so the Elegoo Centauri Carbon that is in my studio here actually got a clog, and I'm kind of surprised by that because it has been flawless. I haven't had any issues with that until this clog here. I do, again, print with the door closed, but I have the riser and have had tons of prints, especially really long ones, successful without clogs. But this one was just using a gray Bambu Lab PLA and just clogged mid-print. came in and it said it was finished, but the print wasn't completely done. And so then I tried to start another print and it was just air printing. So from my experience with the Cheetah Plus 4, definitely have a clog. So we're gonna take it apart and kind of see what happened. What I like about this printer is the magnetic cover comes right off, and then we can just access the hot end right there. So you can definitely see the filament clog right there. So I'm going to turn this on, heat it up, and see if we can clear that. And hopefully that's all it is. I forgot where the power button is for this thing. All right, let's try to load some filament real quick. Seems to be pulling the filament, which is good. All right, looks like we are back in business on the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. Pretty easy fix. If that's the only thing that goes wrong with this printer, I can definitely live with that. All right, so we are back in business with the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. Again, that thing has been flawless. I've had no issues except for that one clog. Luckily, it was just in the nozzle. Not sure what happened there. Again, it might just because of the extreme humidity and heat we've been having. I think the other day it got up to like 83% humidity, so that might be something contributing to this. And again, it does get pretty warm in here once these things are going, so I don't know, I'll figure that out. I've definitely learned how to clear clogs, which is nice and something that you'll probably figure out yourself. If you're new to 3D printing, this is just to show you things don't always go right, things are gonna go wrong, and then as long as you know how to kind of tinker around on things, you should be able to fix that. There's a lot of resources on YouTube and even forums and stuff like that, or videos directly from the manufacturer that show you how to fix a lot of common issues. And then once you do it, learn how to do that, it becomes pretty quick to where that does happen to you. You'll be able to quickly identify what's going wrong and get it fixed and the printer back up and running. So again, just showing you guys my journey in 3D printing. Again, I started earlier this year in January of 25, and it is now currently mid-July. So I have not been 3D printing that long. I've learned a lot, but I still have a lot more to learn, and just taking you guys on that journey. And if I can do it, you guys can do it. If you're a beginner looking for your first printer, which one should you go with? I've gotten that quite a few times. Whether you hate this answer or not, I'm just gonna say it. And I think of my experience with all the printers that I've used, the Bambu Lab A1 is probably the way to go, especially with the combo unit. It just works. Yeah, it has its issues. You're gonna run into some things, but I have yet to have any clogs on those or major issues. Anything that has gone wrong with those have been easy to fix. And the parts are just readily available, whether you buy through Bambu or there's a lot of third-party stuff for those printers as well. I would also kind of caveat that with, I would also recommend the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. That thing, especially for the price point with an enclosed printer at $299 versus right around $549 for the A1 combo, which is kind of the normal price. Obviously it goes on sale for a little bit less, but generally you're gonna find these for about $549. So a little bit more expensive than the Elegoo, but these have multicolor options and parts readily available, whereas the Centauri Carbon, it's a little harder to get parts. If you do buy some extra nozzles, you do have to wait a while for those to come in, and also does not yet have the capability to do multicolor. They are coming out with a multicolor system for that at some point, but who knows how long it's gonna take until we can actually get one of those in hand. So if you're somebody that wants multicolor printing out of the box, again, the Bambu Lab A1 just works. I know there's been a lot of controversy with Bambu, but at the end of the day, I don't give a crap about that. I care if the printer works and it's easy to use, and the Bambu Lab A1 just does its job. Now there is also the A1 Mini. However, I don't recommend that just because you're gonna quickly outgrow that build plate. It is pretty small, and a lot of the stuff that I print, I can't print on that. I have to go with the A1. But if you're limited on space and only print out small stuff, go with the A1 Mini. It's great as well. But especially from my experience, you're gonna outgrow that build plate pretty quickly. So you might as just well pay the extra money up front and get the one that has the bigger build plate, which is the A1. So I'm gonna wrap this video up here. If you guys have any questions, let me know down in the comment section, or if you have any tips on what might be causing my PETG issues. I don't know. I'm going to switch over to the A1 because I've had a little bit more luck printing in PETG on the A1s than the P1S, surprisingly. If you guys like this content, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. It's completely free for you and it helps out the channel a lot. And that way you'll be notified when I come out with the videos on those two printers back there and other ones that I'm working on as well. We will catch you on the next video.